Hello folks. So in this video, I wanted to talk about an error we noticed in our log system. So someone from the development team raised a issue in our issue system, which is Jira. So basically by Atlassian. So saying that so they created a Jira ticket and they said, hey, there's an issue. There are logs that are missing in our log system, and we basically use Loki. So which is an open source log management system where logs are aggregated and all. So they said missing logs in Loki, and this was in production. Okay. Now imagine this. Like, first of all, how does one even find out that your logs are missing? Because let's say your only source of truth is your log system, and your application sends the logs or does not send the log, and finally the end result is it's for some reason it's not there in the log system. How do you find out that it's missing? How do you even know that there has to be one log and it's missing? Like, how do you even look for it? How do you know if something is missing, right? So in this case, interestingly, the developer noticed that. So we have a monitoring observability monitoring systems, multiple of them. Like one is Prometheus for some system infra stuff, and then another one we have is New Relic. So I believe this is for application performance monitoring, so APM, and for some basic things I think. So the developer noticed on New Relic that there is a error for a request, and it's a mature system, so they have a request ID for each and every request. So they are able to notice that this request, this HTTP request, given the request ID XYZ or whatever, failed with 400 error. Okay. So just a moment. So failed with 400 error, and this has happened, and they were able to notice this on New Relic, right? And they even gave a query to us. So New Relic has its own query language called New Relic Query Language. I think it's called NR, New Relic QL query language, NRQL. So they gave us a NRQL, New Relic Query Language query, where they gave us from which database to look at, and then what is the application name where this request was sent, the microservice, and the request URL, the path, URL path, and also the status code, because this was a 400, and also the request headers, for example, the organization ID in this case, some header that uniquely identifies which client, because it's a multi-tenant infrastructure where multiple customers are there, multiple organizations are there, and then the timing, right, when this happened, and the timing was based on our own time zone, which is Indian Standard Time Zone, IST, and they said, like, given this timestamp and this service and this cluster, so this specific cluster, because we have multiple production clusters depending on the region, say India one thing, Asia, and then we have one for Europe and all that, right? So, and then specific to industries and all, like healthcare, one environment, and then specific to sometimes even organizations, right? Like Tata is one of our customers, so we have one for them itself. So they had mentioned this cluster and the request ID, and they were like, this is their New Relic, so they know that it came, and there was a 400 error, but then it's not present, the log is not present in Loki, which is our log system. So our leadership was pretty surprised. They were like, how come log is missing? If there's delay in getting the logs from the log system, that's different. That's because probably the log took some time to ship from the application to the log system, say in this case Loki, and there should only be a delay, right? Like, how come it's missing? What happened? Right? So what are the different reasons you can think of? For example, let's say your log system died at that time, it was not working, then that is one reason that this can happen, right? You can miss logs, and logs are very important, right? And ideally, I think you should have a very strong system for logs. So if, let's say, one system, if your log system, one of them goes down, there should be another one, let's say like something like high availability, or there should be a backup, like you use some third party service or something, say Neuralink, or I don't know. There are many log management systems out there. Like, there is this company called BetterStack. There is Sumo Logic and whatnot. Many companies are out there to help you with log management. So where you can just ship your logs and they'll just store it, index it. You'll be able to query it and all. You'll be able to visualize stuff and whatnot. So in our case, the log system didn't go down, by the way. So instead, something else happened actually. So the log system was working. The interesting thing that happened was there was a rate limit error in Loki, which is our log system, and like based on analysis, we found this. So any system usually has some level of rate limiting, assuming you don't want too much, like you want some fair usage policy, FUP. So you don't want any specific clients of the system using the system too much that other clients are not able to use it, right? And I'm not sure the kind of rate limiting that we set up here, but there was a, I think, default or existing rate limiting that we had set up. I don't know based on what parameters, like is it per client, per microservice, like microservices. In this case, we are running it on Kubernetes. So one pod, is it one instance of the microservice, or all the microservices put together, the amount of logs they send and the rate limiting of that and all. And it's in the rate limiting measurement is also in bytes, like in how much data, so megabytes and all that. I think it's per second. I need to check it out, per second or per minute or what it is. So one example is, say, 100 MB is the rate limit, is what my teammates were talking about. I need to go and actually check this out. So this happened like last month when I joined the company, and this rate limiting was happening, and they were talking about missing logs. So basically what happened was rate limit happened, and after the rate limiting, the logs which were sent after the rate limit exceeded didn't get stored in Loki. And interestingly, thankfully, we had errors. We had metrics to understand validation errors, request validation errors, and rate limit errors. So we were able to look at some metrics in our dashboard, Grafana dashboard, to understand, okay, there was some rate limiting happening here, rate limit errors happened here in this timeline, in this time period where the logs were missing. So then we increased the rate limit. We also added alerts for this. We didn't have alerts, so we added alerts for this. So this is kind of like a bit of a reactive thing, not proactive thing. So because we are reacting to the error issue, we found out what is the issue, and then we are now setting up an alert and ensuring that there are metrics and dashboards where we can actually go and look at this data. Usually people call this, I think, monitoring. I think observability is where you don't know what you're looking for. For example, in this case, rate limiting errors or something XYZ, but you ensure that you are able to find answers to your questions. For example, hey, what was the attribute XYZ's value at this point in time? For which you have to collect all the different things happening in the system, which is almost impossible when it comes to backend systems, I guess. Especially like you're looking at the Linux system, you want all kinds of metrics. You're looking at the network, you want all kinds of metrics at the OS level and at the network, say the cloud network level and whatnot. And at the process level, inside the process, there are multiple things happening. If you want each and every data, that's like too much. But there are companies that say they can do actually observability, where you can ask questions that you don't know about, and you can track stuff that you don't know about yet, like unknown unknowns, right? I think they do only for HTTP requests. I'm not sure though. So this company is called Honeycomb. They say that observability is basically the ability to be able to answer questions that you don't know yet. Suddenly you think of this question and you don't have metrics or data for it. You are not capturing data for it, and now you can't ask questions around it. You have to first of all set up the data, and you still can't ask questions around it from a time before the data was even sent or captured. So I think how they do this is, I think they capture all the details regarding say HTTP request, say request headers, request path, and stuff like that, I think, and the time, response time, and all that, I guess. So Yeah, I mean, they say that they can do observability completely but in this case, we had set up alerts. We got to know what is the question we're looking for. For example, the question was, has the rate limit, error exceeded? Like, had the rate limit error occurred, and did the rate limit exceeded error happen, and like the limit was reached, and when, what time, and get the alert also. And what was the, maybe stuff like what is the current rate limit, and how much was the client trying to actually send, though it got ignored, but do you know how much it got sent, like say 100 MB per second, but instead the client was sending 120 MB per second. Then did you capture that or not is also a question. So interestingly, rate limiting was the issue here, and the rate limit errors came up, and logs didn't get stored. So we increased the rate limits, the limits for these, and I think it makes sense because I think every system should have some level of rate limiting. I remember one of my friends from Amazon, who still works in Amazon, was talking about how they have rate limiting for every microservice, and any of the microservices that use a microservice should, you should configure at every client, or use like every microservice client level. So microservice A contacts microservice B, then what is the rate limiting for microservice A contacting microservice B, and then microservice C contacting microservice B, what is the rate limit for microservice C contacting microservice B, and all that. So pretty interesting stuff. The good thing about it is when you have rate limit, you know that this is the expected usage and this is the expected traffic, and accordingly you just provide it. And if they try to use more than that, they need to come back and say, hey, we need more, higher quotas and higher limits. This is something that's there almost in any system. Even in cloud systems, they have quotas, basically rate limiting only, quotas for different kinds of things in a service. Say the number of, I don't know, number of, say, the size of volumes that you can use and whatnot, the number of volumes, like disks you can use and stuff like that, or number of load balances you can create and stuff like that. So if you want a higher limit, higher quota, so if your quota is reached and you want to increase the quota, then you can just raise a request support ticket support request to the cloud provider, and in this case for the service administrator or the system administrator and whoever is maintaining the system, and say, hey, we want higher limits so that we can use it. And then there'll be a question about why do you need higher limits, how much and whatnot, and then accordingly they'll just provide the limit or maybe deny it. So if you don't have this, and let's say you say something like, hey, we don't want to provide rate limit, any limits, the system should just scale automatically whenever there is more traffic, and then scale down automatically whenever there's less traffic. I mean, it makes sense to think about it like that. Let's say in this case, the log system, Loki, if it scales up, I think it might have some scaling. So this is on Kubernetes, and I'm yet to check out if it has horizontal pod autoscaler, and based on what metrics it autoscales, the traffic, the CPU usage or memory usage, or what metrics, right? So in this case, even if Loki has it, but let's say some bad entity or some client is just sending too much data, and it's not expected to send so much data, right? Because let's say it was having some error logs and too many error logs, and just crashing and again sending too many error logs. Maybe you can rate limit instead of horizontally scaling up your log system or any system that is getting the traffic. You can actually look at okay, above this limit I will not first of all auto scale, and also I will have some level of rate limit, basic rate limit, beyond which the client has to tell me that, hey, I'm using so much and I need so much thing. Especially if you are running a SaaS service, and let's say you are running a SaaS service for log management, the SaaS service must say what is the rate limit or quota, because there are other users of the SaaS service, assuming it's a multi-tenant SaaS service where multiple clients and customers are using it. So then they'll ensure that there's a limit, so that you don't if you're crossing the limit, then you have to go and tell them that, hey, we are crossing this limit, and accordingly they'll increase the limits, and the pricing will also be based on the limits, because if you are having a really high traffic, higher limits, then your price is more, your usage is more, your traffic is more, and all that, right? So yeah, I mean, in this case, we have a rate limit and auto scaling. I need to go and check. The interesting thing is, apart from this log missing issue or error that came up and then the ticket was raised, issue was raised, we increased the rate limits and all that, and then so the other thing, one moment. So basically, we increased the ingestion rate basically. So from one value to another value, and we also increased the RAM memory and the CPU and the number of replicas also. And yeah, I mean, we did all of this to manage this thing across different clusters, different environments that we have, after analyzing how much is the usage and all. And we expect that this will be a bit of a constant and this will not hit. If it hits, we will get an alert saying, hey, rate limit errors were there, and then we'll go ahead and check it out and maybe increase the limit, right? So recently there was a rate limit error, actually, interestingly. And how this came up? Like, this came up because we got an alert, right, that there were rate limit errors. So we went ahead and checked, and then we were not sure of how this happened. There was just a spike, and then it stopped. The rate limit errors were not there anymore after some time. And then later, our project manager, our engineering manager came and said, hey, so there was a load test happening in the production environment during this timeline. And so basically, he was kind of hinting at that this load test is probably the reason why the log ingestion rate limit errors were happening, because a lot of logs were being ingested because there was a lot of logs, because there was a lot of requests, because usually it's assumed that every request is logged. If there's one request, at least one log is logged, talking about that request, saying it's received and all, or what is done there, and maybe more logs are also printed for each and every request. So you have more requests basically because of a load test in this case, then more requests than usual, so more transactions per second or more requests per second or per minute and all, RPM, RPS, TPS and all. So then accordingly there'll be more logs, more then, and hence since it's actually a request per minute or per second, the rate at which the log is generated is also high. The rate at which the log is ingested in this case is also high, and hence, so instead of getting buffered and whatnot, instead it actually ended up and maybe even after buffering and whatnot, it ended up with the rate limit errors. And so I was then wondering about how can we actually, so we didn't know about this load test, the infra table. So then I was asking my manager, how do you know about this? And he said he's aware of the different load tests happening across different clusters, across different regions and different environments. So then I was just wondering, can we actually have a system where people can communicate and say that they're running a load test on a specific environment, especially in production, so that the infra team or any team that needs to know about this can get notified about it. Some sort of like broadcasting system where developers or any team can just say, hey, we are running a load test now for this time, this environment, these services, these products or these platforms or whatever, these clusters, regions around. And then the infra team then can correlate what are the different events that happened in this system, and then we'll be able to say that, hey, something happened here, can we go and check if it's correlated and whatnot, right? So yeah, I mean, that's one idea. And yeah, I mean, accordingly we increase the rate limit and all that. So in this case we did increase the limit, so that the rate limit errors don't come up and logs don't go missing. So yeah, I mean, that's all I had for this video. And by the way, if you have rate limit errors and you're missing logs and losing logs, and if it's a very big problem, then you might have to scale up. But every time you scale up, you ensure that you're also getting alerts that it's scaling up, and you go and check if this is a valid scale up, an expected scale up, an expected rate limit increase. You can automatically just increase the rate limit quickly. And this can happen maybe when you're noticing, let's say it's 100 Mbps per second, when you're noticing that it's almost 70 or 80 Mbps per second, the rate at which the ingestion rate is increasing, that is, so Mbps per Mbps PS, like Mbps per second, the rate at which it's increasing, understand that and ensure that you can quickly actually scale it. So the understanding that how much scaling up will be able to accommodate uh, the rate at which the ingestion is increasing, and some better ingestion rate, like scale it up by one instance to get this much more ingestion rate. With the ingestion rate also limit increase and also get that ingestion rate. So you need to understand how much you need to scale to get a specific amount of ingestion rate to be able to handle it, and also ensure that you increase the limit so that errors don't come, and also go ahead and get an alert. And also, so when you get the alert, you also go ahead and check it out and understand if this is a legitimate thing, or else it will just keep increasing, scaling up, and also increasing the rate limit value, the limit value for the rate limiting, and also scaling up, and it'll be too much resource usage. And let's say it's a problematic some attack or whatever is a problematic thing, then you go ahead and figure out how to resist, stop these logs from coming by stopping the attack or looking at all of that, um, instead of just scaling up. And of course the system also has to scale down accordingly. So I think it's important to keep an eye on the log ingestion rate in this case, for example, or similar to this, like any traffic ingestion traffic, and understand the rate at which the traffic is increasing. And so some like 1000 requests per minute, and then suddenly it's 2000 requests per minute, and the rate at which the requests per minute or requests per second or transactions per minute or transactions per second is increasing. Understand that, and accordingly auto scale, have more instances, have more resources, say CPU, RAM, and assuming if you want to do vertical scaling, or do both horizontal and vertical scaling, and then also look at how we can increase the limits in the configuration of the service, and go ahead and check it out. And then of course get an alert to ensure that you have an idea of like why this is increasing, and to check if it is a legitimate reason, or if there's any attack or some unexpected thing happening. So yeah, that's all I had for this video. um, so I will see you in the next one, and bye bye.